you can see, it needs a new exhaust.
I'm exhausted, but it's all done now.
In today's episode, we're going to be tackling the exhaust on Project Redemption using all these great Vibrant products. In front of me here, I got a bottle style resonator to keep the drone down, an assortment of some tubing, a nice cast splay to make a nice dual exhaust at the back, and some pie cuts to make my tips line up real nice.
Yeah, then we also have some 3-inch bends in case we got to kick it any sort of way. Got plenty of V-bands, got some hanger rods, single wall tips with some reducers to neck it down from 3 to 2.5. We also have a street power, so that way we can really keep the exhaust tone nice and streetable for Kyle's car, because this isn't a race car, it's a street car.
Before we get started, let's quickly talk about exhaust components. I'm sure you might be wondering what to use for your own build, so let me just quickly tell you what I chose and why I chose it. First, let's talk about resonators. Every street car needs one to tackle drone and stuff like that on the highway. You'll see that I went with the bottle style resonator. First off, it fits up really well in my car. And second, these ultra quiets, while they're very good, they also carry a lot of packing material in it. And that adds a lot of sound suppression, which in some cases is good, but for me, the tone that I was going for, I felt the bottle was gonna work. And next up, we got the mufflers. So for my car, I'm doing a dual exhaust that Y's at the back. So for that, I decided to go with the round body StreetPower opposed to the traditional oval style. I did that for two main reasons. First off, this round body fits up really nice at the back cavity of my car. And then second, I really like the look of the two mufflers splaying outwards. So I think I'm gonna have a really nice sounding exhaust that looks cool as well. With all that being said, let's check in with Tanner.
So the first place we're gonna start with doing this exhaust is putting the bottle style resonator in, but we already did our cat with V-band flanges and all that stuff ready to go. We welded that on a positioner, so that way it looks really nice, but it's also a nice functional, high penetrating weld. So we're actually gonna place this right underneath this factory heat shield, which is luckily, just a couple inches away from the high flow cat. So we're gonna go ahead, cut a piece of tube, throw a V-band on it, and we're gonna continue with this modular system that we're designing for Kyle. So sometimes when you're working with V-band flanges and tubing and things like mufflers and resonators, is that you'll have a little bit of a loose fit up sometimes, and that's just kind of nature of the beast. So luckily I have this expander here that I'm able to expand out the tubing and actually make it fit nice and tight, just the way I like it to fit. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna go ahead and expand this other side. That way it fits nice and snug into the V-band, since this other side's already expanded to fit into the bottle resonator. You probably don't have it in your garage, but most exhaust shops have this. So if you're trying to make a really nice system at home and you got a little bit of a sloppy fit up, go ahead and take whatever you have cut down to your local exhaust shop and just ask them to swedge it out a little bit. And honestly, it should cost maybe 20 bucks, a thing of beer or something like that, but they'll really be able to help you out by ensuring you have nice tight fit up on all your weld joints. So one thing you want to do whenever you put something into a slip joint is just make sure that it's actually square, because it's really easy to have this be kind of kicked a little bit. And you won't realize it until you're, halfway through the process, and then you have to cut apart an entire exhaust just because you didn't pay attention to that one little detail. So always take your time, double check it, check your angles. I've been doing this a long time, so I can kind of eyeball this and I know if it's gonna be 90 or not. So if you're not sure, grab a digital angle finder and just, 90 it off your table, and then you can just put it up, 90 it this way, 90 it that way, and that's all you really need to worry about. So the other way that you can actually 90 this too is if you have a nice big block like this, you can actually take this, put it up against here and square it like that, and then it'll also kind of get you really, really close as far as if it's really 90 to the body or not. I'm able to look at it and it's actually pretty 90. So we're gonna go ahead and roll with this, and then we're gonna actually purge it just like this and see what happens here. One thing you'll notice is that I don't use filler whenever I tack, because I actually went through the trouble of expanding all these joints. They fit up really, really good. So you can kind of just blast them together real easy, and it, as long as you have good fit up, nice clean purge, you can just tack them together real easy, real quick, and just keep on going. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to purge my tacks. A lot of guys may not agree with that. A lot of guys think it's unnecessary, and that's totally fine. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. You know, do you guys do it? Do you not do it? Is it a waste of argon? Let me know. What do you guys think? So one of the advantages about purging your tacks is that if you do have a really hot tack and it burns all the way through the tube, you don't have that little bit of sugaring spot. We're gonna weld this on the positioner, so I always wanna ensure that I have no contamination inside or outside, so that's why I go through the hassle of purging my tacks. As you can see, the tacks didn't burn all the way through. That one is a little bit hotter than the other one, but again, there's no sugaring on the inside, but it was about to burn all the way through. So next up is the cast splay that we're gonna be doing towards the back of the vehicle. It's gonna go somewhere over here, roughly. I want enough room for the bends, the 2.5, to wrap around the subframe, get independent hangers on and all that kind of stuff. But I also wanted this to kick and hopefully get it kind of in the middle of the car. So that's gonna take a little bit of you know, math, but luckily I got plenty of material in case I do mess up. But hopefully we can get this on the first time go, and we'll see what happens here next. That's pretty good. Might just up kick that a little bit, we'll see. Make sure we got nice drive shaft clearance for that splay, and I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, cool. So one easy way to figure out what kind of bend angle you need off of something is just to put it on the very side, and then you can kind of bend it exactly to where you need it to be in the middle of the car, give or take, which is gonna be roughly between 10 and 12 degrees, as I've already measured this. So somewhere in between there should be pretty good for what we're trying to do here. And what that ends up looking like is something like this, where you have a bend with just a little bit of kick on it, but that's all we really need in order to get this right in the middle of the car, which is pretty much what's happening right there. So I'm really happy with that. I always like to leave things a little bit long as far as the leg lengths go on here. So I'll go ahead and clean these up, you know, Scotch Brite them, acetone wipe down. I'm gonna swedge the one side out a little bit to fit onto the bottle style resonator. And then I'm gonna chop down the other side to put the splay exactly where I want. But this way I know for sure that I have enough length on all my sides in order to fabricate the rest of this exhaust system. So we got the tube cut, tacked, and the next step is gonna be trimming down our lengths right here to bring the splay back a little bit, because I want the bend to come off of here and be able to curve around you know, the control arms and whatever else we have going on over here. And then we're also gonna trim this side down a little bit because we got a little extra length in here. So we're gonna go ahead and actually mark that one, so that way I can cut it, and then I can also swedge it to fit nice and tight right in here. So that way once I'm done welding my joints over here, this side will be ready to go as well. So now that we got our positioner all set up, we got our base fixture aligned, we also have the resonator attached to it. We're gonna go ahead and start purging this thing out. We'll let it purge for a good 15 minutes, give or take. And then we're gonna go ahead and weld with that V-band. Then we're gonna move on to the joint between the resonator and the piece of tube. Okay, so we're gonna run through the setup of how I'm gonna weld out this V-band real quick. So I got my V-band all purged out right here. It's purging at about 5 cubic feet an hour, anywhere between 5 to 10, depending on how big the tube is, how big the setup is, and all that kind of stuff. It's usually my go-to is 5. I'll let that purge for about 10, 15 minutes, 15 minutes if I have a lot of time, 10 minutes if I'm in a hurry. And then I'm also gonna be using 045 308 filler, because this is a 304 flange to a 304 tube. So that's the filler of choice for this one. I'm also going to set my torch up at about 28 cubic feet an hour. I always use one of these little testers just to verify that my torch is actually shooting out what I want it to be shooting out. A lot of regulators, unfortunately, they're kind of off, and like on these bigger cups I'm using, like the Furic BBW, it's gonna need a little bit of more regulator than you might think actually. So just, if you don't have one of those, grab one, check out your stuff, make sure you're flowing good. And then as far as the machine goes, I got it about 88 amps. I'll be using the pedal, obviously. So I'm probably not gonna be using all of that, but I'll be using anywhere between 50 to 60 amps is my guess. But let's see what happens. So one of the things I like to do is I'll use a pair of V-bands. You know, obviously you have to account for this in the cost of a project, but I always take a male and a female V-band and I'll weld them to a piece of tubing. So that way I have both sides ready to go. So this way you can clamp them together, and that way when you purge and weld them, you can let them cool like this to minimize all the warpage. So we just finished welding out the resonator to the V-band that goes to the high flow cat. Now we're gonna work on the back section over here. Like we talked about earlier, we have this little tiny bit of a bend right here. We want this 90-degree splay to be as centered in the car as possible, mainly for aesthetics. It's not really gonna affect flow too much. Having a dual 2.5 from a single 3-inch, these are gonna definitely flow more than this will ever flow. So it's not gonna be too big of a deal if it's not square or straight or something like that. So let's go ahead and chop this down a little bit, and we'll go ahead and get this tacked up, throw it back on positioner, and we're gonna finish welding this all out. So we've been working on some of the tubes that connect the cast splay over to the StreetPower mufflers that are gonna be over here. So what we have here is a 45 that I took about a third of it off, so we're somewhere around 30 degrees on the bend. We're actually gonna kick this down a little bit. That way it can shoot underneath this subframe right here, because we wanna try and keep this exhaust as much tucked as possible as we can. So this is gonna shoot down a little bit, and then it's gonna angle back right over to where the mufflers are gonna be in the back half over here. We're gonna go ahead and tack this up and keep on rolling with the rest of the exhaust. So what we have here is we have the one side of the splay bend already right here. It's measuring about 25 degrees, and I wanna make a mirror image of that. So what I'm gonna do is take a flat surface, such as this heatsink block, put it up against a new bend on the nice flat side, right? And then you're gonna take your bend, you'll take a 90-degree right angle, put it up against the tube, kind of where you think it's gonna be, and just bring in the tube until it just barely touches. Then you can go ahead and make a Sharpie line on that tube. So then that way, you know approximately where you need to cut. So obviously you're gonna give yourself a little bit of extra meat there, and then just cut right along here, and that's gonna give you a nice mirror image bend. All right, so cut it. So we got a rough cut, now we gotta sand it. Let's go see how we did. So we're back on the fab table. We got our stuff all set back up, and we're gonna compare the old to the new, which we have the new one on the bottom, the old one on the top. So we just slide in the top tube again until it barely touches, and then we can kind of see the difference between the top and bottom. So we know that we need to shave it a little bit more. So we're gonna take it back over to the belt sander, shave it some more, and then we're gonna keep on checking it against the master. So right now we're sitting about 24 degrees, give or take. So we got about another degree to sand off this thing, which isn't a whole lot. So you can tell this gets us really close, really fast, and saves us a lot of labor time. And when you're trying to build an exhaust like this. So here we have our rough draft of the cast splay and the tubes that are gonna be coming out of this. They're roughly cut to about 25 degrees. Got a little 2-inch extension on these, which will pop into here. We'll weld those up real nice. And then this is gonna go onto our main 3-inch portion of the exhaust on the car. We have the mid pipe with the resonator all tacked up. I went ahead and welded a couple of the joints already. So those are all done. We got the cast Y prepped and kind of fitted for how we want it to fit into the car. These aren't gonna be welded in yet. We're gonna fit those on the car in a little bit, but we're just gonna weld this one joint right here, and I'm gonna walk you through a little bit of some of the prep I did on this cast Y. Whenever I deal with the cast part, I always sand the outside, I sand the inside, and then I also sand the face of it so I get nice fresh metal on all three sides so I don't get any surface contaminants, and hopefully no issues when I go to weld it. So let's go ahead and check out how this welds. So like I said earlier, I went ahead and I prepped the outside, the face, and the inside of this. That's to reduce the amount of contaminants because this is a cast part. You do want to make sure that you're giving yourself some fresh, clean metal to weld to. As you can see, I didn't get all of it off, but I got 99% of it off, which as you can tell from the weld on this other side, it welded out just fine. So at this point in the process, we're moving on to getting the mufflers prepped. As you can see, we got this one set up in the positioner. I've actually had to shorten the inlet down a little bit. I'm also shortening the outlet down a little bit because I want to bring the tip closer to the muffler. It's mainly for aesthetics, but unfortunately aesthetics kind of, fit with function as well. So once we get to the tip portion, it'll actually help us by not having the tip hang way out past the bumpers. So the next step in the process is going to be getting from the cast Y all the way over to the muffler. We've already started mocking with the muffler just a little bit, trying to figure out the space we wanted, the angles. We also had to account for the tips that we have that we're working with. So we went ahead and tacked the tip into the muffler. We also went ahead and welded a V-band on the inlet of the muffler as well. I always like to put V-bands on the mufflers so that way if Kyle ever wants to change, all he has to undo is one V-band in the very back, and then he doesn't have to redo the entire exhaust system. So we always try and incorporate multiple connection points to make it not only modular, but also expandable later on. Let's say if he wants to do titanium mufflers, he wants to do twin tips, he wants to do a blast pipe, he can do whatever he wants later on without having to redo the entire system. So we're at the next step of the process here. We got the tube from the cast splay Y all the way over to the muffler right here, where I already pre-welded the V-band on the positioner. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna tack this a couple more times and make sure it doesn't move on us, as well as right here, and then we're gonna go ahead and weld this out. So we got that one all welded out. As you can see, we're using the pulser now, which my go-to pulse settings are usually about 1.1 to 1.2 pulses per second. The machine's set to 55 amps, and basically when I start, I just go full pedal, let it pulse a couple times, 3 to 5 times, depending on how the pedal's looking. Then I know it's fully penetrated, and then I start moving. I usually weld from about the 2 o'clock to the 12 to 11 o'clock range. I don't like to try and do too much because I want to maintain good gas coverage, and on a small tube like this, it's really easy to lose when you come around to the backside over here. So let's go ahead and weld out this other joint right here and get it back in the car. All right, so we just finished the last weld, and as you can see, you always want to do a couple things. You want to consider what you're welding, where the weld joints are going to be, and how you're going to be welding it. You don't want to weld this joint first because then when you go to weld this joint, you're actually going to burn your hands, which kind of sucks. I'm also using 035 filler. I just like a little bit of filler whenever I'm doing a butt joint like this. I don't chamfer the edges or anything. I just let it all burn together. If you have a good solid purge, it's going to help give a little bit of back pressure inside the tube, so that way you don't actually wind up with too much fill on the inside either. So we're going to let this cool off, and we're going to put it back up in the car, and then we're going to keep going along with the process. So far, everything's looking super good. Everything's fitting up just the way we want. It's swooping down just underneath the axle, just the way I wanted it to. You can also see we had to get a little tricky with trying to get the muffler to sit where it needs to. So we actually use a piece of wood and some spark plug heat boots in order to lock it in. You always want to make sure that nothing moves a whole lot until you're kind of done and you have the hangers finished. It's happened to me a couple times where you'll get done and all of a sudden the whole thing's just kind of ruined. So definitely when you're doing something like this complex, take your time, weld out the joints as you go, and don't forget to check the muffler tip angle. That's the most important part. So here's the last joint in our system. It's fitting up really, really well. It just kind of slides right up in there. Needs a little bit of trimming on the one side to be absolutely perfect. But by taking our time and ensuring that there's no gaps, whenever I go to weld this, it's not gonna pull on me and cause the whole system to kind of be cockeyed or off angle or do something that we don't want it to do. So as you can see, we got the joint from the cast splay Y over to our little straight section right here. We got this all fit up, prepped, acetone wiped down, deburred inside, outside, a little bit of Scotch-Brite on the edge right there. I only have 3 light tacks. We're gonna go ahead and put a couple more tacks on it. Same exact settings, 55 amps, pulsar, 035 wire. We're gonna keep on rolling with this. There you have it, guys. Another weld joint done in the system. So lastly, we're gonna prep this joint by shaving a little bit more off, but like I said, I always wanna make sure I weld the joints out as I go along the system. It accounts for any pull, any weird stuff that the tubing's gonna do. Always make sure that you're thinking ahead, planning ahead, where the weld joints are gonna be, how you're gonna install the system. The other thing that we have to tackle as well is putting a hanger over here to help support the backside of the muffler. So as you can see, our exhaust is basically complete for this one driver's side portion. All we're doing now is we're installing this other hanger right here, which helps triangulate the rest of the exhaust, so when we go to move to the other side, it doesn't want to do anything weird to us. We're also going to be adding this little bit of a gusset right here to help strengthen this hanger, because you always kind of want to think about the life of the exhaust, and having a single pivot point kind of creates a failure point. So we'll be doing this to not only this hanger, but also the other hangers later on in the process as well. So the next step in this process is going to be moving on to the passenger side of the exhaust. Now what I've done is that we're trying to make this as mirror image as possible. So I've taken and replicated the same bends from the driver's side onto the passenger side with one exception. This will be the first bend off the cast splay. And then I have a nice piece of straight tubing that attaches right onto it. And this will be the piece that comes from the muffler over into the middle of the car. Now, the piece that's missing is the one that's going to join the straight tube to this tube. Because I don't know if the angle is going to be exactly the same, I don't want to cut that piece yet and waste a piece of material. So this is just one of the tips and tricks I have for trying to do a mirror image exhaust. The other thing is that whenever you reference a piece of tubing, you have the clamp side and then you have the mandrel side. That's just the way I refer to them. But this way you can always ensure that you're cutting from the same side of a piece of tubing, since all these pieces of tubing that are bent come from the same length. So you can just subtract from the end back up onto the tube in order to make your cut lines and all that kind of stuff. So let's get into the next part of this and let's go ahead and build out this passenger side. So we got one of the hangers tacked up. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the other hanger on the right-hand side. And then we can adjust for any kind of tip movement that has to happen, whether it's left to right or up, down, just a little bit. But we basically got the tip exactly where I want it to be to kind of match the left-hand side over here. So that way, when the car's on the ground, hopefully the tips are not only pointing up the right amount, but they're also pointing in or out the right amount, and the rotation of the tip, because it's a slash cut, also that's in phase as well. So there's a lot of aspects to really keep in mind when doing something like this, especially with slash cut tips. So definitely take your time, triple check, align everything, check angles, just do the best you can though. So now that we got the last hanger bent up for the rear end of the muffler, We're going to actually tack it onto the end, and then we're going to change any of the shifting that we need to do on the tip lastly. So let's go ahead and do this. So the tip's gonna need a little bit of adjusting, but we got it pretty close. So we're gonna go ahead and pull the muffler off and take a look at it, tweak the brackets a little bit, and then keep on rolling with the rest of this. So we're at the point of the project now where we have the tube that connects the muffler V-band over to our cast Y piece that we tacked onto the car a little bit ago. We're gonna go ahead and weld out these two joints right here. The same settings as earlier, 55 amps, got the pulsar on. We've been purging this for about 15 minutes, give or take, after we welded the V-band, just to let everything cool off. We're gonna go ahead and weld these two, put it back up into the car, and then we're gonna finalize this joint right here at the very end. And then we're gonna move on to pulling the rest of the exhaust off, welding the last two joints, and then putting the last hanger onto the system. And then hopefully we're done. So there you have it. We got these two welds all done. Once again, we used 035 filler, 55 amps on the machine. Got the moose knuckle Furic cup on the torch right now, flowing about 25, 26 CFH. Bottle's getting a little bit low, so we probably need to check that again. But just make sure whenever you're doing something like this that you make sure the tube is properly purged. Purging is key. Having no breezes throughout the shop is also a really good, helpful hint for a lot of guys. Sometimes you may think it's an issue with something else, and it's really just you got a small breeze from the outside. So starting on the front of the system, we have the Vibrant 3-inch V-band setup going into some 3-inch 16-gauge 304 stainless tubing, which then flows into our bottle-style resonator, which should help keep a lot of the drone down for Kyle's car. After that, we have some more 3-inch tubing exiting the resonator, going into our cast splay Y. So leading into the cast splay is some more 3-inch material. And then on the outlet side, we have dual 2.5 to keep that flow nice and optimized. On each side of the 2.5-inch tubing, we also have some 3/8 hanger rod that we bent up and welded to the system. We also made some custom plates that mount to the subframe that also have 3/8 hanger rod. And then going down the system, we have various bends, 15 degree, 45 degree, some straight tubing, as well as some more hangers towards the back of the exhaust. Finally, right before the mufflers, we have two more sets of V-bands that are 2.5-inch, followed by our StreetPower mufflers with the custom tips at the end. And so a bunch of you guys are probably wondering, how does it sound? Well, unfortunately, you're gonna have to wait until the final episode when this car hits the dyno. So we just wrapped up the exhaust, we got it all done, and this is Kyle's first reaction to actually seeing it all 100% welded.
Yeah, it looks absolutely amazing. I've been working a lot this week, so I haven't been able to really see all the progress. I kind of stick my head in every now and again, but this looks amazing. Like I told you before, it looks like a robot did some of these welds. Just incredible.
Do what I can.
You were telling me earlier that you made sure to make sure that if I decide to go with a wider tire, that I'm gonna have some nice clearance with this muffler. You did some nice
so
placement
one
there.
of the issues on Kyle's car was the muffler, the old setup, was a little bit close to the tire due to the spacing and everything. So we tried to tuck the muffler in as close as we could to the inside of the car while still giving us the clearance on the inside of the gas tank. We don't want it to be too close to that either. So this way, if Kyle does ever decide to upgrade his tires, he'll actually have enough room there to not hit the mufflers.
And we have this really nice modular system. I could kind of pop things in and out.
Yeah, we got both of the mufflers are on V-bands right behind them. And then we also got the hangers back here to help keep everything nice and centered. And each muffler actually has two hangers in the front and there's a singular hanger in the back. So the whole system kind of comes off, pretty easily, honestly. It's not bad.
I'm super happy with it. These tips look absolutely amazing.
Yeah, as you guys saw, the tips were a bit of a battle. It takes a little bit of struggle to get something like this all lined up. And I'll be honest, they're not perfect, but sometimes we got to make sacrifices, and that's, I think, one of them that had to be made. So yeah, hopefully we can adjust those a little bit later on down the road. Yeah, everything came out pretty good. So that's a wrap for episode 6 of the exhaust that I built for Kyle's car. Project Redemption finally has an all new custom one-off exhaust.
Yes, man, thank you. You killed it, as always. Came out amazing.
No problem.
Be sure to tune into the next episode where we're going to be plumbing this entire car, top to bottom, using all sorts of Vibrant goodies.
Yeah. And also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you guys thought of all this. And if you like this content, let them know. Let's do some more.
Yeah. Peace.
Later.